Okay, good afternoon everyone. And welcome to the Regional Automated Vehicle Trials Industry Briefing. My name is Natalie Pelham and I'm an Executive Director at Transport for New South Wales in Innovation, Research and Reform. And it's a pleasure for me to host today's event. And it's particularly exciting to see Transport for New South Wales taking the next steps in understanding how automated vehicles might transform our transport services for the future, and particularly in regional New South Wales. So thank you very much for coming today. We really appreciate the attendance, and I'm hoping this will give you an opportunity to get some better understanding of what our objectives are of the expressions of interest, and also the process that you'll be going through in terms of putting forward a submission. So hopefully we can give you that information today. That'll really help you along the way. There's just a couple of sort of safety and comfort formalities for me to go through. So the first one is, if there is an unlikely and a likely event of an emergency, we've been instructed that we should be wait here for instructions from staff, that there will be the usual beep, 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 whoop, 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 but someone from the venue will come and talk to us and lead us down the stairway, and our meeting point or assembly point is at Westpac, which is over on Market Street. So we'll let you know if anything like that needs to happen, but I think we'll be safe this afternoon. For the restrooms, if you go out the back of the room and to the left, the women's is on the left, and if you go along past the atrium, that's further along the corridor, and then to the left you'll find the men's. If you wouldn't mind putting your phones on silent, that would probably help everybody, so we won't have any interruptions. And also, I just wanted to let you know that we are filming today's session. We really want to make sure that as many people as possible have an opportunity to understand what we're looking for in terms of an expression of interest. If you do have any issues with that, you don't want to be on film, could you please let one of the team know, and we'll make sure that we deal with that for you. Okay. So before we start the briefing, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders both past and present here today. On the 1st of December, the New South Wales Government opened expressions of interest for the Regional Automated Vehicles Trial. And that's what we're here to talk about today, and as I said, we're really excited about that. Through the EOI, Transport for New South Wales is seeking to provide some seed funding and also to partner with industry, researchers, local councils and businesses to develop and co-deliver a number of connected and automated vehicle trials across regional New South Wales. We think there'll be a lot of lessons that we will collectively learn from these trials, and we think that's going to help us to identify and implement new, creative and better ways to deliver transport services. We're also hoping that the trials will give us an opportunity, or give industry an opportunity, to develop some technology and products and services that can be deployed to deliver improved mobility for our customers. And I guess that's the key for us at Transport for New South Wales. We're interested to learn more about how emerging technologies can be applied to better provide customer services and outcomes. So trials of automated vehicles for us are an important mechanism to help us determine what they can best deliver for our customers into the future. That's one of the reasons why we want to do these, to learn and to understand how we can apply these technologies in a better way to improve customer outcomes and transport options. So the way that we've structured this afternoon is in 3 parts, and we hope that's going to help you understand how to best respond to the EOI. Move to the next slide. Okay, sorry, I've got the next slide. Makes it easy, doesn't it? Okay, so this is what we've done. We've structured the afternoon in 3 parts. The first part is the industry briefing. We'll have an opening address from 2 of our Deputy Secretaries, Claire Gardner-Barnes, who's the Deputy Secretary of Freight Strategy and Planning, and John Karaboulis, who's the Acting Deputy Secretary of Infrastructure and Services. We'll then go on to look at the request for EOI in detail, and what we'll be doing there is looking at what are the project objectives, what is it we're actually trying to achieve out of this trial. And Evan Walker, our Director of Smart Innovation Centre, will be talking you through that. And the last part of the industry briefing section is really then outlining what is the actual process from development of proposal through to submission and then evaluation. So we've got a few things there for you to try and give you some understanding of that. We have Emma Reedy, who's our Project Director on Demand Transport, and she'll be talking about some of the process in detail. We also have Andrew Marsden from O'Connor Marsden, who'll be talking to you about probity and the tips of the trade around that. And then Julie G, our Acting Principal Manager from Regional Strategy, will be talking about the work she's been doing in the regional strategy area about transport for the region for the future. So I think that should give you a good grounding of the sorts of things that will help you develop some use cases that you might want to explore through this EOI process. We'll then have a Q&A panel session, so the people who've been working on developing this EOI package, and most of the people I've already spoken about so far, will be part of a panel to help you answer any questions that you might have on how to pursue the EOI process. And that'll be followed by a networking session. This space will be available until 6 p.m. this afternoon, and we'll be serving a light afternoon tea. So again, an opportunity for you to meet and talk to others, and also talk to members of the team to get more information that will help you. So while today's briefing is primarily about the details of the Regional Automated Vehicle Trials expression of interest, it's important for you to understand how this initiative fits in with other work that we are doing at Transport to help reach our vision for the future. So Future Transport 2056, which I hope many of you commented on and saw in the last sort of 6 weeks or so, out there, a lot of representation from Transport across Sydney and around the regions, getting people's input into our future transport strategy and their ideas on whether or not they agree with what we're proposing. That's been a great and concerted effort across the cluster on getting that out, and also getting the information and engagement with the public, which has been great. But the future transport strategy sets the context and the vision for our integrated transport system, and in conjunction with the technology roadmap, it sets the direction for connected and automated vehicles, enabling the trials that will help determine the next generation of transport services. Future Transport 2056 is overseen by Claire Gardner-Barnes, our Deputy Secretary for Freight Strategy and Planning, and I'd like to welcome Claire to the stage to touch on some of the broader policy planning and strategy work that Claire is leading in our transition to an automated future. Please welcome Claire.
Thanks, Natalie, and good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here and great to see this much interest in this important initiative. Great that you could be here, and I hope this afternoon you find very valuable. And following this session, if there's opportunities for further discussions, please don't hesitate to make further contact through Evan who you'll meet today. So look, the key context for why we're focusing specifically on regional parts of New South Wales for a trial is that we know that there's going to be a very different learning environment for automated vehicles within regional parts of New South Wales. It's not been a focus area for many trials across the world, and because most of them are done in major centres, and Minister Pavey in particular has been very keen to ensure regional parts of New South Wales do not miss out. And so for us it's very much about, well, what are the benefits in regional parts of New South Wales, larger centres or smaller towns, so that we can start to explore some of the benefits that this potentially could bring. Many of you here today would be aware that there's a trial already underway in the planning stages, and we have a vehicle out at Sydney Olympic Park, and that trial will commence more fully throughout next year. You'll see it out on the road and undertaking its mapping. So we're looking forward very much to moving to a space next year where that particular vehicle is offering a real public transport option for those in that precinct. And that's really what we're trying to achieve here. It's not about innovation for innovation's sake. We're here to learn around the benefits of what automated vehicles can bring for both passenger and freight services across New South Wales, and demonstrate with our collective wisdom with other jurisdictions how we can escalate and promote automated vehicles take up throughout over the next 10 years. We want to make sure that New South Wales is central to that activity and leading the way, and this is part of that program. In order to do that, we know that it's very important that we partner with businesses, with academics, and ensure that telcos and all of those players that ensure the success of such a trial are part of that partnership. We don't want to go alone. We want to share our learnings with other organisations and businesses, and we want this to be an opportunity for everyone to learn, and also for the general public to come on board and see the benefits. So to provide some context around future transport, as Natalie indicated earlier, the Future Transport 2056 strategy was put out over 6 weeks ago now. While formal consultations are closed and we're in the process now of finalising the plan and taking on board all of those comments, it's important for those who are interested in putting in an expression of interest that you understand the broader context. So one of the key things for Transport for New South Wales right now is becoming a technology agency. That challenge has been put to us by Minister Constance. He sees that all of us within transport need to see themselves as technology agents. And in fact, for us to do that, we need to work differently, think differently, and also procure differently. And this is part of that process. We need to partner with others in a different way to ensure that flexible and agile transport options for the future are delivered in a way that we have never seen before in New South Wales. And John Karaboulis, who looks after information and for infrastructure and services, will talk to you more fully about what that might mean as we work towards a more disruptive transport system across New South Wales. The Future Transport Agenda really focused on a high-level vision. It focused on out to 2056, but throughout the plans we looked at priority projects for the next 10 years, 20 years, and then beyond that, quite visionary opportunities. For those of you who'd like to take a look online, all of the plans and the strategy is still up there, and you'll see very much a strong technology focus. And this is really building off the Future Transport Technology Roadmap that was led by Tony Braxton Smith and released by the Transport for New South Wales in 2016. That sets out a framework for how we will move towards being a technology agency, and this is one component of that. So there is a much broader framework that we're working within. And that's to ensure that as we develop our transport models for the future, they're very much focused on intelligent networks and creative opportunities that respond to customer needs. When doing this, we are very much focused on safety and efficiency. If you go onto our Future Transport 2056 website, you'll see there are 6 major themes that have been endorsed as the outcomes that we are trying to work towards in transport over the next 10 to 20 years. And that's about a customer focus. It's about ensuring we have economic growth, develop successful places, have safe and productive transport systems, that we are sustainable, and that we have accessible transport systems. So all of those things, those outcomes come together and provide a framework for how we're moving towards the release and the growth of autonomous vehicles on our roads. And that will be an important part of your response to the EOI, how you're actually helping us deliver future transport by achieving those outcomes. One of those key components is, of course, safety, and we know that with human behaviour causing much of the trauma on our road network, the opportunities for autonomous vehicles are significant, with 70% of all road fatalities and 76% of serious injuries occurring in regional parts of New South Wales. There's a big issue for us to address around safety, and that will be a key priority as we look at the EOIs. So for those of you who are interested in exploring in more detail some of that regional data, if you go to the Road Safety Centre website within Transport for New South Wales, you will see a whole lot of data that will help you identify the locations that we really need to target and some of the age groups and profiles of those that are particularly problematic in regional parts of New South Wales. So the Centre for Road Safety website is where you'll find that information. There's also a whole range of other tools and information that would assist you. The other key thing that we're trying to drive home through this approach is reduction of congestion, and while that may not be a big issue for many parts of regional New South Wales, there are growing parts of and regional centres that we need to make sure as we plan going forward we avoid congestion, and so this is an opportunity to make sure in our future planning we're doing that. We have 40% of our population living in regional New South Wales, and out to 2056 we expect the population growth from 3.1 million people to grow to over 500,000 more people over that period. So there are significant parts of regional New South Wales that are certainly growing, and this EOI process will help us understand how we can better provide transport services in those communities. You'll see when you have a look at the documents around Future Transport 2056 that there are some significant changes that are proposed for how we provide transport services. One of those is the need to open up more clearly the east-west links in regional parts of New South Wales. We've put a lot of effort previously into transport coming into Sydney and the north-south links, but we know that more and more transport needs to open up the east-west links if we're going to provide effective services to our customers. You'll also see an emphasis on interregional connectivity. We're looking at a hub and spoke model where we're creating and declaring regional centres and how we can connect those more effectively. Many of our current transport solutions from our coaches and our rail networks are very much focused on bringing people into Sydney, and we want to make sure through this hub and spoke model that we create new transport options that reflect the research that we've done about people who live in regional parts of New South Wales and expect and want a much better transport system. We're also employing what we're calling the movement and place framework that allows us to explore more appropriately intermodal solutions. Throughout New South Wales in regional towns, there is no connectivity between our aviation timetables, our train timetables and our coach timetables. So we have huge opportunities there to improve our connectivity and improve what customers are saying we want. We've also created a draft tourism plan, and part of what we'd like to see you address through this EOI process is the benefits for tourism. Regional parts of New South Wales have a significant tourism credit to our New South Wales economy, with 37.2 million domestic trips to regional New South Wales last year, and from a tourism perspective they're making up 65% of overnight stays. So a huge part of our economic growth from tourism is actually happening in regional New South Wales. There's also opportunities for connected and automated vehicles to provide first and last mile opportunities into our public transport networks, to provide airport shuttles and other precinct opportunities much more broadly than what you might expect in a Sydney focus solution. As part of our vision comes to the fore through the finalisation of the Future Transport Agenda, you'll see that we're much more focused on a policy agenda. There's a significant amount of infrastructure being built by transport at the moment. We're spending over $1 billion a month in investment in transport infrastructure and services, but we can't continue to build our way out of this solution, out of these issues, given the population growth that's ahead of us. So we need to think more creatively, and policy solutions like CAVs are going to be part of that if we construct the models in the right way to try and reduce congestion and help us provide transport options that will better respond to what our customers would like to see. We have enabled that through changes to our legislation. So this year, through legislation and introduction through the House, New South Wales Government has allowed for Minister Pavey to create trials to occur. She now has that head of power and those trials are stated in the legislation as being quite broad. So the process then, for those of you who haven't looked at the legislation, will require you to submit a safety case, and once you've done that, we will put it through our rigorous process to make sure all of those safety issues are appropriately addressed, and then Minister Pavey has the power to sign that off to conduct a trial. There's a clear reason why we've created that sort of legislative framework, and that's because by creating that head of power, we can be quite flexible in how we implement these trials as new innovation technology comes to the fore. We're also trying to make sure wherever possible our approach to automated vehicles from a regulatory perspective aligns with what's happening more broadly across Australia. So we're working with the National Transport Commission through their approach, and there's a lot of documents online that you can use as tools to help you see how the Australian government and other jurisdictions are working with us to create a common policy platform for implementation. So right now we're trying to make sure that New South Wales is positioning itself as a key leader in this space. We're researching now what's happening internationally, we're creating links, we're exploring what's happening in places like the US, in Europe, in Singapore. We're creating new partnerships. There's a lot of interest in coming to New South Wales to trial automated vehicles and connected vehicles. We already have a high record of trialling this sort of technology through our city program that operates through the Illawarra area, where we've got over 60 heavy vehicles connected to improve safety opportunities along that corridor, and that's continuously being expanded, and to the point now where those vehicles are starting to connect to traffic lights to give them a clear way through. So you can see that outcomes not just related to safety but also reducing emissions through our heavy vehicles are part of this agenda. We're trying to make sure that we look at this holistically, which is why we've got the Smart Innovation Centre being established, and Evan Walker, who's heading that up, is really the key contact for making sure we get this holistic response. So this afternoon, I hope you have the opportunity to have many of your questions addressed. We know that this is a really important time to learn, to think about the different challenges, to put on our black hats and think through all of the safety issues we need to work through, but also our creative hats around what it might look like in different contexts. This is an opportunity for us to look at regional New South Wales and how the customers and the clients that potentially might use this technology will have their needs met in quite a unique way. That might mean the rollout happens quite differently. It might mean that we look at mass transit solutions in a different way to what we might in with small hubs, with pods or other opportunities that are already available in other countries. We are keen to explore new types of CAVs in New South Wales, and we're very keen to see how your contributions through this EOI process will open up the doors for many other opportunities across not just regional New South Wales, but potentially also expansion into Greater Sydney area. So I thank you for coming this afternoon, and I'll hand over to John.
I think in the interest of time, we'll skip with some of the introductions, if that's all right with you, John, and we'll move into the next presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Within transport, we have recently seen and experienced advancements in technology, data availability, and increases in smartphone applications. We have seen the emergence of new entrants and disruptors such as Bridge, Uber and Lyft, and some of those are more successful than others. And we've experienced significant changes in transport demands. It is quite evident that these changes have a significant impact on the transport landscape. Simply doing what we've been doing over the last 10 years, tweaking and improving our service plans and contracts by adopting perceived industry best practice is no longer good enough. It will not deliver a fundamentally better transport system. Currently, we are piloting on-demand services as a means of increasing the attractiveness of the first and last mile components of public transport, often referred to as feeder services. Pilots have already commenced in the Sydney metropolitan area, and we commenced the tender process for the regional areas only last week. One of the aims of the on-demand services is to provide first and last mile services that are at convenient times to the passengers. We knew others in other jurisdictions and around the world were playing in the on-demand space. However, we struggled to find any real success stories. From what we know, most jurisdictions were either overly prescriptive and restricted innovation. They trialled only one type of transport and technology solution, or they were quite ambitious and they relied on the proposed services being commercially sustainable. We decided to take the problem to the market and encourage innovation. We purposely avoided being prescriptive. That was quite difficult for us at Transport. The result was quite impressive. We received 66 proposals, and as I mentioned earlier, we've only just kicked off the regional tender process. Now we want to do something similar with the automated vehicles and working with the industry in shaping the future transport model. This is a huge learning experience for us, and we are excited to work with you and learn how automated vehicles will impact the delivery of transport services in the future. We are excited by the potential automated vehicles create by better connecting people and communities. We want to trial automated vehicles in regional centres to understand their potential in delivering actual services to passengers. We intend on working with shortlisted parties and local communities to identify the best places to trial these services to maximise the learnings. Our transport contracts would need to look quite differently in the near future. Both the on-demand and automated vehicle trials are designed to inform our next generation of service delivery contracts. For us, this is about continuous improvement and working towards New South Wales being a leader in the provision of transport services. The first of our current metropolitan bus service contracts are due to expire in 4 years. The lessons learned from these trials will inform the next generation of contracts. That is how important these trials are to us. Automated vehicles create an incredible opportunity to improve services, and when you combine the lessons learned from the on-demand trial, well, the possibilities are endless. This is an exciting time for transport in New South Wales, and I encourage you to take part in this important initiative. Thanks for your time.
I think it's great to see some of the potential customer benefits that these new service delivery models could deliver, and also how we might enable and leverage some of these emerging technologies to transform what we're doing into the future. So I'm hoping that both those presentations gave you a better sense of the strategic context in which we're operating at Transport, and some of the opportunities that we've been trialling more recently with the change in our service delivery models, and that is then leading us to think what there are further opportunities in terms of what connected and automated vehicles might do in transforming those services into the future. So this brings us to the next part of the briefing, where we'd like to give you some more details around the actual EOI objectives and also the process. So I'd like to introduce Evan Walker, who's the director of our Smart Innovation Centre. Evan is going to talk to you more about the objectives of the trial, and in particular, I suppose, some of the things that we want to achieve through it, why we're doing it, and hopefully that will give you some sense of that. The Smart Innovation Centre, for those of you who don't know, is Transport for New South Wales Technology Hub, and it was established to facilitate research, development and piloting of innovative transport technologies. But one of the key things underpinning its operation is the ability for us to develop partnerships with others. No longer is it the case within transport that we think we have the answers, that we're trying to work internally to do things. We actually want to look outside, get involvement outside, hence we're going down this process with this new way of expressions of interest. Evan, would you come to the lectern, please?
All right, thanks, Natalie. Look, for mine, it's really exciting to see how many people there are showing up to this EOI. We went into this not quite imagining what it could look like, and it's really encouraging. I see a lot of people out here who I know work in the industry, people who are familiar with the technology, and also familiar with the different transport issues that we might face. Now, I wanted to start by talking about what we're really trying to achieve from this expression of interest. And you've heard a bit, I guess, from Claire and John about how we're talking about what future services might bring and some of the key outcomes that we're hoping to see from automated vehicles or connected automated vehicles on our networks. We know that technology is currently evolving, and if we were to go out and try and procure a service straight away for an automated vehicle today, it's going to change very quickly compared to what could come out next year and what could come out subsequent years. So what we really want to do is go out into regional New South Wales and try and create collaborations and partnerships to support innovation and trials that are going to inform what's happening in regional New South Wales around potential services. We want to be a leader in this space. We don't want to wait around and see what's going to come from other jurisdictions. We want to be taking the lead and really getting that knowledge ourselves, because regional New South Wales is such a big part of the state. It's so important when it comes to productivity, when it comes to some of our key industries, and there's huge customer groups out there. And we know there's genuine use cases for this technology out in regional New South Wales, so we're really hoping that this process uncovers some of that and helps us find some solutions. We want to know that the emerging technology that's out there is going to meet what our infrastructure needs are. We want to understand that when we design infrastructure or design services, that there is some matching with the technology and it's going to work together. We also want to create shared learnings. So we're not looking to go into a process where we're just purchasing a trial. We want to go into a process where we're a genuine partner, where we provide an opportunity to trial with other partners so we can share learning. So we create some information, some IP that we all benefit from out of this piece of work. So that's kind of what's in it from our perspective and why we're doing it. But a really important part is what's in it for you. I mean, why is this such an interesting opportunity for industry? And I'm sure you guys have some ideas from your point of view, but for us, it's really, there's a great opportunity here to actually partner with government and trial technology on our network. You can't do this any other way. You can't bring automated vehicles that don't have drivers, that are advanced technology, and actually try it in a real environment with real customers against real infrastructure. And this is an opportunity to do that right now in regional New South Wales. Its ability to test that technology with a real transport use case against real customer needs. So it's not in a laboratory, it's in a real environment. And for people who aren't directly involved in, I guess, the technology aspect of it, it's a chance to innovate and collaborate with technology leaders, with other industry players, with those kind of people who can bring the information to you. It's also a chance for people to gain a real broad understanding of where the technology is up to, what the emerging technology is. And like John described earlier, it's a real opportunity to evolve our future service delivery models. So how can the technology that you own, that you're part of, that you're developing, that you're aware of, can really service future delivery models? And the last part of it is this is a process we're actually going to put some seed funding in because we want to partner in these projects. So we're going into this, like I said, not to buy a service, but to come in as a seed, to provide some seed funding, to partner in projects, to enable innovation to happen, to make sure it's answering some of those key use cases in regional New South Wales. And we're looking to get value for money out of that funding. We really want to see more than one trial occur across the state. We're not just looking to invest in one place. We want to get as much learning as we can, as much value, as many opportunities and partnerships as we can generate. So if I break down, I guess, the project objectives a bit more, there's 5 key ones, and these are all listed out in the EOI document. We want to understand connected and autonomous vehicles as part of the transport network. So how do they integrate into our transport services that are out there, and how they might do it into the future? We want to understand customer outcomes. So what's the potential for this technology to improve customer outcomes? We want to know the technology's capabilities. So what is it capable of now? What is it capable of into the future, especially in regional New South Wales? Are there issues around the physical or the digital infrastructure we need to know about now so that we can plan into the future? We want to know about the physical infrastructure, and we also want to better understand our role as an enabler, as a facilitator, and as a service provider into the future. So now I just wanted to talk about a couple aspects of the scope of the trial, which I think are quite important. So firstly, what's the more specifics around the scope? So we're really looking at areas where we can improve mobility and transport services and transport outcomes in regional New South Wales. We're looking at things like off-peak services, first and last mile, visitor and tourist transport, mobility in precincts or around local towns, end-to-end journeys, and the kind of high-level things that both John and Claire talked about as well. In terms of vehicle types, it is about automated vehicles, so we're really interested in things that are SAE level 3 or higher. We're not interested in the lower levels of automation, which are really critically important in themselves, but in this particular process, we're really interested in those higher levels of automation. And the trials aren't limited to public transport services at all, so we're really interested in a really broad spectrum of services and vehicles, light passenger vehicles, they could be taxis, different on-demand solutions. I think Claire mentioned pods, shuttle buses, the full works. We really want to see what the market, what people can come back with and what kind of collaborations can be created. The other aspect of the scope, which I think is really important, is the location criteria. So I thought I'd take a little bit of time to unpack that. So the first part of the location criteria is that the trial site's located in a regional city or other regional location and suitable for operating the proposed trial. Second one is that the trial would support genuine local transport needs. And the third is that the regional area has sustainable local support to establish and deliver the proposed trial. So I might unpack each of those. So in the first instance, we've proposed a regional city or other regional location that's suitable because we think a regional city in itself is something that could support and be suitable for a trial, because what we're thinking is around the infrastructure, is around the customer needs, and we really want the process to find use cases that are also suitable for the environment that they're placed in. So whatever the projects we come back, we're going to be looking for how suitable they are, but it's not restricted to regional cities. It's just we're saying that they're a location we feel could probably meet the suitability of trials, but we're sure there's other locations that also would fit the bill. When we're talking about local transport needs, we really want to see that there's genuine transport use cases being solved by these trials. And that's one of the reasons why this process involves going out in the regions, doing some collaboration events, because you'll hear from Julie a bit later about some of the use cases we know are there, but talking to the local people, local business, chambers of commerce, local transport operators is where you'll get the best information about what the real local use cases could be. And like I said, we want trials where there's a sustainable local support for trials, because we are talking outside of Sydney. So we don't imagine that we're talking outside of Sydney and outside of Newcastle and Wollongong metropolitan areas. So we're imagining that you'll need people on the ground, some local support, whether it's universities, whether it's local chamber of commerce, whether it's local council, who can support the trials and the efforts that are occurring. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the time frame. So up front, we're looking for a 12-month trial that commences next financial year, but there'll be the option to extend into 24 months. And then there's always the option in the future to consider whether it's a sustainable transport solution that's been established. And in terms of funding, we are providing seed funding. So we're not proposing to fund a whole project. We're really looking for co-investment. We're looking, it's a competitive process, so we're looking for the best projects that represent good value for money for us that come through the door. So there's some co-investment involved. And we're going to consider the merits of everything that comes through the door, and we'll consider how the funding might be structured. But there is definitely a minimum amount of co-investment in the projects that we're looking for, and we want to go in as a genuine partner into these projects, because our experience of automated vehicle trials is that technology is not at a point where we can go out and just write a contract and leave it there. We know we'll have to be involved, whether it's from the legislative side, whether it's from the technology side, but there's going to need to be involved from us as the project progresses. So we're also looking for partnered projects. So where it's appropriate, we're looking for projects that are a real genuine collaboration between people in the technology space, between the academic sector, between whatever's really required in those regional areas to get trials off and running. It could be with a whole range of people: insurance providers, local industry partners, comms providers, motoring associations, app developers, the vehicle manufacturers, the local service operators, precinct owners, local councils and researchers. So we're hoping we see projects that come back that are real collaborations, whether it's at a local level or not, but we're looking for partnered projects. We're looking for things that come through the door and we can see how it's going to be delivered, start to finish, how all the different bases are being covered through a partnership approach. We want to make sure that there's real flexibility in the process. So we're conducting some, like I said, some regional collaboration events where we're going to go out to the regions and enable that networking to occur. We're going to invite a full range of stakeholders in 4 regional areas and beyond to enable those partnerships to form. And there'll be flexibility around how that's done. We're really open to who you want to partner with on this kind of project. And we also want to understand from you how the project you might design integrates with our existing infrastructure and service delivery models, so we know how we can support from that point of view. Because we really want to get the greatest project outcomes from the trial that we can. And so lastly, there's the legislative and regulatory considerations. So we really believe that right now in New South Wales, we've got the right regulatory environment to be trialling automated and potential shared services. So as Claire mentioned, 1st of August, we launched, we put out into an act, Parliament signed off on an act that allowed us to trial automated vehicles on the transport network. So we're currently running the first process around that, which is the trial at Sydney Olympic Park. We're generating an order for the Minister to sign off on to approve the trial. And to enable that, the order itself will set a whole range of conditions that are quite flexible depending on the trial, but the key thing we need to make sure of and that covers off is safety. So we'll run a safety process, we'll work with the proponents to make sure that happens, but it is a piece of legislation that really allows a great range and variance of different trials to occur. We're also considering the national NSW guidelines for trialling automated vehicles. That's an important document for people to consider. There's also the point-to-point legislation. So if people are proposing things where they want to charge customers money for a service, you need to consider our point-to-point legislation, which is operating as well, which again creates a real flexible approach to provide services in New South Wales, but you need to be mindful of what that looks like, and I've got a link up there, and we can obviously provide more details about that as well. So the process to go through an approval, we've got a bit of a timeline that sits underneath, but it's basically once we get a submission or a project, we look at the use cases, we work out what the safety assurance looks like, we have to address the NTC guidelines, we shape an order that the Minister's happy to sign, and then we get the approval to kick it off. And we'll enable that process. But as projects come through the door, one of the criteria is that they've considered that legislative framework. So we don't want to be going from scratch for any proposal because The more information we have at the start, the quicker it happens, the better we can run the process. So we really want to make sure that for proposals that come through, proponents have really considered what that legislative framework looks like. Okay, and that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, I'd just like to introduce Emma Reedy. Emma's currently the Project Director for Transport for New South Wales On-Demand Transport Management Program, and she's worked collaboratively with the Centre in developing the Regional Automated Vehicle EOI package. Emma's going to talk to us more about the detail of the process, looking at the proposal development, submission through to evaluation. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, Natalie. Welcome, everyone. What I want to talk to you about today is the process and the timeline for that process. I also want to talk to you a little bit about the collaboration approach that we're taking with this process, which is largely based on what we have done with the On-Demand project. The process concluded for the Sydney metropolitan area recently, and as John said, we've just launched the rural and regional process. So I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about the development of your proposal and the minimum requirements, and then also about how you submit it. So firstly, I want to just talk to you a little bit about the approach that we're taking with this, and we're trying to create an environment here that enables innovation and collaboration. So we had overwhelmingly positive feedback from the industry with how we approach this in the Sydney Metro On-Demand program. And it starts with not only the documentation that we've put out, the freedom and the flexibility that we're giving you in developing your proposals, then also the way that we're going to collaborate with you and work through this co-design process. So it starts today with this industry briefing, and this gives you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. There are also other avenues for you to ask questions. This isn't the only one. There's also going to be a networking opportunity after this event as well, which gives you the opportunity to talk to other parties who are interested. Then we follow that with collaboration events. So at this stage, we are targeting between the 29th of January and the 9th of February 2018 to conduct these events. We're going to hold 4 events in Wagga Wagga, Dubbo, Armidale and Coffs Harbour. And basically these are to give you the opportunity to collaborate with other parties and form partnerships and relationships that may be required to develop end-to-end proposals. That's what this is to provide. So we're trying to create the environment to allow creative ideas to be developed through collaboration. And if you look at our evaluation criteria, potential speed to market is one of our criteria. So the end-to-end solution has the best chance to get us into market sooner. What will follow after that will be interactive sessions. Again, we did this with the On-Demand project. The proponents who took part in our process found this very beneficial. These are confidential sessions which are not used to form any basis or any part of the formal evaluation process. So we don't want to take anything from you at those. In fact, we ask you not to give us any hard copies at those things. You can bring documentation with you, but we won't keep it. It is strictly confidential, not used for evaluation, and registration will be essential. Basically, the purpose of these sessions is to give you the opportunity to come and present your idea or your proposal, no matter how formed it is. To come and sit in front of a panel of transport stakeholders, tell us what your proposal is, present it to us and get real-time feedback. This feedback then enables you the opportunity to further refine and enhance your proposal. So registration for both of those events is going to be essential, and further details about how you register and the dates that they'll be on will be provided shortly in the coming weeks. Then that takes us to the inquiry cut-off time, so you have the opportunity to ask any questions up until the 16th of March, 4 p.m. there on the 16th of March, and then we'll close the EOI on the 19th of March. What we'll also be doing to assist in this process is we'll be giving you the opportunity to opt in, to provide us with information that can then be distributed and disclosed to other parties. We will absolutely get your consent before we disclose this to other parties. But basically what this is, again, is to enable you to identify potential partners that can help you develop an end-to-end proposal. So participation is completely voluntary, and as I said, we will get your consent before we disclose any of this information. But basically what we're going to be looking for is your contact details, what you want to get out of the trial, what opportunities you're most interested in, and what role you're looking to play. What do you need and what can you offer? They're the key things here that can help make those connections with other parties. So the documentation will be circulated to do this to those who have registered through the eTender and Ariba portals. That is going to be the primary form of how we give you information through this process. So if you haven't registered, I encourage you to do so. That's where we'll be putting the information and the updates. And we will circulate this and get that information distributed before the collaboration events. So now I just want to talk to you a little bit about the evaluation criteria and how we approach this. So ultimately, the proposals that are shortlisted and that we will enter into an agreement with are those that represent the best value for money for government. So to determine what represents the best value for money for government, we have to go through an assessment process. And so we assess each of the proposals against this criteria and we give them a quality score. So I just want to talk you through each one of those. The first one there is the alignment with the project objectives. So we'll be assessing proposals in terms of how they align with the project objectives. So those that will give us the most unique and valuable insights will be preferred. And probably some advice I can give you here, definitely with what we learnt through the on-demand process, is that whatever solution you land on, whatever your proposal is going to be and how you're going to approach this trial, if you go on a journey to develop that proposal, you need to take us on that journey. The assessment team needs to understand how you came to that being the solution. That's some of the best advice I can give you from the on-demand process. Don't just tell us this is the answer, tell us the why this is the answer. The location criteria, I won't spend too much time on that. Evan already talked about that. So there is a location criteria provided. And as a minimum, the scope of these trials is all of rural and regional New South Wales outside of the Sydney and outer Sydney Metro bus contract regions. If you're not familiar with what those regions are and where they are, then there are maps contained within the EOI document. And if you have any further questions about what may or may not be in scope, then you can provide that through the inquiry line, which I'll talk about shortly. We'll also be assessing proposals on the level of innovation that they provide. So we are looking for innovation here. We're looking for new and creative ways to deliver these trials. We also need proponents to demonstrate how these solutions or the proposed solution could be integrated into the broader network. That should be covered in the proposal. Potential speed to market is the next one, which I briefly already touched on, but this does have two components to it. So firstly, it is the speed to market for the trial. So we need to understand what the timeline looks like, what the key milestones are, what the transition plan looks like, and what an estimated go-live date would be for the trial to commence. But then we also need to understand what it would look like if this was to be rolled out more broadly following the trial. So it's a two-tiered approach there for potential speed to market. Evan already touched on the broad range of skills and experience that we think are going to be required to both develop and implement and assess this trial and run this trial. So we will be looking at the capability and the capacity of the proponent, and not only the proponent that puts in the proposal, whoever is nominated to be the lead proponent, but all of the partners that form that proposal as well. So we'll be assessing them in terms of the capability and capacity that they bring and their ability to deliver the pilot project. And the ones that will be preferred will be the ones that demonstrate the most well-rounded capability and capacity that we think will enable them to achieve all of the outcomes. The next one there is alignment with the NTC trial guidelines and the New South Wales legislative framework. So those that demonstrate the best alignment to those two will be preferred as well. So then, as I said, we do the value for money assessment, and Evan already touched on this. The evaluation will consider the request for funding. It's not just about the dollar value or the price of the proposal. That certainly is a consideration. But in determining what gives us good value for money, we consider a range of factors. We consider risks and opportunities and benefits. We also look at the total request for funding as a value and also as a proportion of the budget that we have to work with as well. And as it's stated in the RFEOI document, we are expecting a minimum of 1/3 of the project cost to be borne by the proponents. So in terms of the proposal requirements themselves, so as I said, we have tried to be a lot less prescriptive than what you will normally see in procurement processes, and that goes to the way that you can develop your proposal. So we're saying it can be in any format and any length that you like. Do bear in mind we've got an evaluation team that needs to read these things though, in the length that you choose to make them. But we are giving you that freedom. Whatever you think we need to know, make sure you tell us. There are minimum standards that are set out, so we are giving you a lot of freedom, but we have set some minimum standards. They are set out in section 12, and I will talk through a few of those, and some of them are listed there on the right-hand side. But I just want to cover off one other thing and just confirm to you that this is a one-stage process. For those of you who have seen the eTender website, you may be a little bit confused because it says it's an EOI for specific contracts, which requires pre-registration, proponents to be assessed against a selection criteria, and then people will be invited to tender. That's not how this will work. This is an EOI. You have until that closing date to put in a proposal. There is not a two-stage process. So now I just want to talk to you a little bit about the minimum requirements. Obviously, we'll need to understand the scope of the proposed pilot or the proposed trial and how it aligns with our stated objectives and the evaluation criteria. Make sure you set that out really clearly. We need to know what the intended trial outputs are, and we also need to know what the research objectives and trial outcomes are. And just in terms of the trial outputs, we're talking both data and other things. So in this section here, we encourage you to set out any of your IP concerns or considerations. So any IP that you may be bringing to it or anything that may be developed as part of this trial, make sure you set it out in this section. We'll need to know the details of the proponent, both the point of contact for this proposal and all of the partners who are going to form the basis of this proposal. We need to understand who they all are, what role they'll play, what skills they bring to the proposal so that we can assess them against that evaluation criteria. So we'll need a high-level outline of the role of each partner and their proposed contribution. And when I say contribution, I mean financial, in-kind or other. So any skills and experience that they bring, as well as any financial backing they may be bringing. What we'll also need to know is how the trial is proposed to be funded. We need to understand what level of funding you're seeking from Transport for New South Wales. We absolutely need to know the level of funding you'll be putting in, as one of the key requirements is that you contribute 1/3 of the project funding. And we also need the justification as to why you need the Transport for New South Wales funding in that section. I already touched on this in the evaluation criteria and the way we'll do the assessment. We need to know what the project plan looks like. So the timeline for project delivery, the key milestones, what the different work packages are and how they all fit in, what happens when and what we will get out of each stage, what the intended outcomes are of each stage. And then we'll also need you to cover off the legislative and regulatory considerations that Evan has touched on there. In terms of submitting your actual proposal, you'll notice everything is through eTender, and there are details there on eTender about how you submit it. So you will be submitting your proposals through the Transport for New South Wales e-procurement system, the Ariba portal. Jordan Lay is the primary contact for this RFEOI. So you will get the opportunity to ask questions at the end of this, and hopefully we can address all of them and you may not have any more to ask, which will be perfect for us. But if you do have any more, they all need to be filtered through Jordan Lay. His details are up there. Email is preferable. We have provided his mobile number because if you do experience technical difficulties with submitting your proposal, particularly if it's right before the cut-off time on the 19th of March, just give Jordan a call on his mobile, but try to restrict all other communication to that email address. So he's the main contact. So please try not to come and contact us directly. Don't go through the Smart Innovation Centre. We will just divert you back to Jordan. Jordan will triage those questions. In most cases, they'll probably come to us to answer anyway, but that is the avenue. There's one point of contact. So as I said before, in the minimum proposal requirements, we do need to know who the primary contact is. The project team needs to know who to contact if we need any further information or if any clarification is required. If there is more than one entity, you need to tell us who else is involved in the proposal, as I said in the minimum requirements. And if you haven't already registered, please do. If you have registered and you haven't received login details, then the email address is up there. Yes, it is, tss.bidder@transport.nsw.gov.au. Lastly, I just want to talk about the trial agreements. So the proposals that are shortlisted and are successful in moving through to be provided with seed funding, we will seek to enter into an agreement with those parties. So we will seek to enter into an agreement with one nominated party. That will be the party that is provided with the seed funding payments. And we will seek to enter into these agreements. If everything goes according to plan, we would expect that these agreements would go live in late 2018. As mid to late would be our goal to get those agreements up and running. So as Evan said, these aren't the sort of contracts that we just sign and we set and we forget and we leave you to it and we come back and see how you went in 12 months' time. We're probably going to be like that best friend that you don't want to have. We're going to want to talk to you all the time. We're going to want to understand what's happening. Are you achieving the goals? We'll want to understand if there's something that's not working that we can assist you with. So we will be conducting trial progress reviews at 3-month intervals. Every 3 months during the term, we'll have interval, but we will not leave it to just the 3 months. We'll be in contact all the time. If there is an issue, we don't want you to wait until the next 3 months review to tell us about it. We need this process, and the agreement will be structured in such a way that it provides flexibility and agility for us to make changes on the fly without any bureaucratic approval processes. Anywhere we can improve things really quickly, if there are really easy wins, we'll look to do that straight away. So as Evan said, the initial trial agreement term will be 12 months. Then Transport for New South Wales will have discretionary ability to extend by 2 further terms of 6 months to a maximum of 24 months. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. That was really comprehensive. I guess like any market process, it's important that we follow robust procurement principles, with probity being very high on that list. So to assist us, we've appointed O'Connor Marsden and Associates for the EOI process. And to explain a little bit more about the role of the probity advisor and the requirements of the probity plan, please welcome Andrew Marsden. Thank you.
It's pretty rare that probity gets some clapping, so that's great. I'm going to put up here a slide, and it talks about a probity plan, and effectively a probity plan, if you think about probity, it's just about fairness, and it's about expected ethical behaviours. The notion of the plan, this is a plan that's a two-way street. So Transport for New South Wales and everyone on that side of the table, if you like, will be expected to follow certain behaviours. E.g., one of the things that's been mentioned already is confidentiality. Really important. To get collaboration, we encourage people to bring their IP to the table. Obviously, it's your IP, you have to protect that when you do collaboration with people outside of transport. From the transport side, there's going to be strict confidentiality obligations on them so that it doesn't get cross-contaminated, and your IP remains your IP. So that's a really important element when it comes to the early phases of this procurement process. The other point that's been touched on by Emma, and I'm just going to reinforce it, it's the contact. People in this room will have relationships already with people within transport or other advisors they may be using. For this procurement process, anything to do with this RFEOI, your contact is Jordan Lay. Now, Transport's gone to the extent of giving you a mobile number, which normally they don't like to do. And yes, Emma says email is the go, but what it really means is there will be a dim view, and we'll be one of those people saying take a dim view if you contact outside of that point. So really take that discipline, please. So finally, to sort of pull that back, why do we have probity and why do we do these things? And Emma's already talked about value for money and measurement. Fundamentally, this is a partnership program and it's about collaboration, but it's also about demonstrating policy outcomes that are in the public interest. And probity is important because it's involving public funds. And when you go into collaborative methods of procurement and engagement, there's always lots of people on what we call snipers on the grassy knolls, people that like to take pot shots about whether this has been done well or not, and at some point in time, an audit office comes in and goes, ooh, that's a bit of a different procurement method. How have you done it so that it's fair and consistent? That's why we're here. It's from that schema of things, it's about trying to make sure it's fair, it's consistent, you get equality of opportunity. What are we going to do? One of those points says we're effectively going to test the controls, those probity controls, both in live time and in retrospective time, and be available for you to make sure it's been applied effectively and consistently. So other than that, we're going to hand back over in a minute, but we do certainly encourage, and probity is not here to block innovation or collaboration, but to work partnership with some nice ethical boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Important messages for us all. The next discussion is really around some of the regional strategy work that's been done by Transport. And you've seen how Claire provided some broader strategic context for the work that we're doing towards 2056 and what we think our integrated transport system is going to look like. And John also provided that understanding of some of the new service delivery models that we're after and how to actually deal with that first last mile issue in a much better way. But what we wanted to do now is actually take it to the regional context to give you an understanding of some of the work and our own understanding of what's happening in the regions so that you can actually use some of that information hopefully in developing the use cases that you're going to come up with that you'd like to explore through this expressions of interest process. So I'd like to welcome Julie G, Acting Principal Manager, Regional Strategy.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming along today. So my role within Future Transport has been leading the regional strategy development work, so preparing a services and infrastructure plan for regional New South Wales, so everywhere outside of Sydney. So that has involved a whole... Oh, have I got it right? Sorry. So that has involved a year's sort of work to come up with the strategy document and the supporting plans around that. But a key part of it has been going on the road and talking to people around the state. So we've been to over 60 locations around New South Wales, so very much focused on the large regional cities and larger centres. So certainly we've talked to community as well as we've talked to local councils and industry. And there's been a great interest in technology and its potential for the future. Certainly there is some scepticism out there around, when is this technology coming? There's significant black spots in some areas between centres regionally, so that has, comes up as an issue of concern. But certainly being able to say to people, well, there's a trial of a CAV happening in Sydney at the moment, and we're certainly looking at doing that regionally. And when we presented that information to people, they were extremely excited and all wanted to sort of get involved. So certainly there's a lot of interest out there, which is fantastic. In terms of thinking about regional New South Wales, I guess in terms of the challenges there that are a little bit different to, say, a CAVS trial in Sydney, for example. In regional New South Wales, people tend to use public transport when they have no other choice. People, if they can drive, if they have access to a vehicle, if they have a driver's licence, they will drive. They don't tend to use public transport unless they have no other option for local trips. It's a different story for longer distance, but certainly for local trips. So we're really seeing that perhaps the CAVS trials and the on-demand trials that Emma's also been involved with, it could be very much about providing that support for people locally. So looking at how we can make places better for people, whether that's people that live there, whether it's people that are visiting, how can we resolve some of those sorts of issues? So we see sort of potential use cases in terms of things like first and last mile challenges, the lack of connectivity between longer distance transport modes, so air and rail and coach, compared to local scheduled bus services, for example. Looking at transporting visitors around tourist locations, but regionally there's a lot of seasonality in terms of demand for services. So events is one thing that comes up a lot, but also in coastal areas, in the snowy mountains areas, in winter, there's those different challenges that happen regionally. So there is often congestion, but it is not all the time like you might experience in Sydney. There's also opportunities, I think, related to things like university precincts or health precincts where there is potential for helping people get around more easily. There's also, I guess the other thing to consider regionally is that the population is ageing faster than it is in Sydney. So that creates additional challenges in terms of people having access to vehicles and driving. So we see that is a potential. Another area would certainly be younger people. younger people have over the years often felt that they've needed to leave regional locations because there is a lack of opportunities for employment, and training, but often that has been exacerbated by lack of transport options to get to those training and employment opportunities. So, and certainly young people are great at embracing technology. So we really see that that is something that we can work towards. So in terms of the trial, we certainly have seen that there is a great interest across the state in a more customer-focused, responsive type transport models. And certainly the CABS trial that we're talking about today regionally is really exciting to be leaders in Australia looking at a regional use case rather than a metropolitan one, which obviously has that critical mass element to it, but very different needs. And the CABS trial is certainly supporting the principles and customer outcomes that are very strong and at the heart of the future transport. So in terms of improving accessibility to centres, to employment services, health, retail opportunities, cultural opportunities. Flexible transport services are a key part of future transport, really recognising how we can provide that connected door-to-door service model that right now we don't do as well as we could. It's also, I guess, about how we can use capacity better. So perhaps, cabs may be a solution to an after-hours transport need rather than a scheduled transport need. So rather than replacing a scheduled service, they could actually be complementing a scheduled service. So they're just some brief examples, but I think the thing that it's really important to think about that certainly, Uber has changed the face of transport in Sydney, and I think there's the potential for the future to change significantly regionally, but we need to, help push that along. So I think, there's certainly that appetite out there, certainly interest from councils and businesses, people on the ground, local transport operators, community transport operators, taxi companies, I think all have great ideas around where the gaps are in their existing transport networks locally. When you think of some of the size of some of our regional towns and regional cities, around 60,000 people, if each of those 60,000 people are making an average of 4 trips a day, that's nearly 250,000 trips a day in and around that local area. There must be a great capacity there for the cabs to solve some of those transport needs that people have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, so now we're going to be moving into the Q&A section of today's briefing. So this is the opportunity for you to ask our panel members all those things that you've been waiting for up until now, and hopefully we can answer most of those for you. Andrew Hooley, our Senior Project Officer in the Smart Innovation Centre, is going to be facilitating the panel discussion. So Andrew, if you'd like to come up, and also the 3 panel members, Evan Walker, Emma Reedy and Julie G.
Do you want us to sit in any order?
No, wherever you want. Okay, thank you guys. Just before we get started with the panel discussion, I wanted to sort of outline some of the ways that we'll run today's session. But really, as we've outlined, this is a great opportunity for everyone here in the audience to ask us some questions, ask us those clarifying things. What are the burning questions on the top of your mind? It's a great opportunity now because the next opportunities will be in February at those collaboration events. So on the panel today, we've already met all of our speakers, but really these guys are the subject matter experts in the different areas that we're representing. So we've got Julie from a regional strategy perspective, really who can hone in on some of those questions and inform the kind of use cases that you might be looking to develop and those kind of areas that you might be looking to collaborate with to develop these projects. And then Emma from a process perspective, but also from a really tangible service delivery angle. So how do these trials morph into something into the future along with the themes that we've been talking about today? And then lastly, Evan, so from a sort of overall project perspective, what are the objectives that we're looking at? What do we want to achieve? but also all of that experience in the ministerial exemption process. How do we actually turn something from an idea to wheels on the ground with an automated vehicle trial? So just to step through a couple of things, because we are filming today, all of the microphones are hooked up through the camera. So that we can capture everything on the videos, please speak into a microphone if you're going to ask the questions, and we'll do the same up here. And before you ask the question, if you could just state your name and company, that would help us with the answer. So as I've mentioned, this is your opportunity. Please ask us any of the questions that you've got in your mind. We'll do our best to answer it now. Otherwise, we'll get back to you through the distribution list of people that have registered on eTender. So with that, I'd like to get into it. Did we have a first question from anywhere? Excellent, at the back there.
I just wanted to know the thinking around the fuel excise duty problem with 39.6 cents in the litre paid in tax with current fuel engines. If you move over to an electric engine, how will you, say, fund the roads?
Sure. So in future transport, there's there's a strategy document that sort of addresses some of these sort of issues that are really going to come and face us within the next 40 years, and certainly moving to electric vehicles and the fuel excise question is certainly considered within that, as are other funding issues related to transport. So certainly in this future transport strategy document, if you have a look at that online, we certainly think about things such as sustainability in terms of the environment, and obviously electric vehicles fall into that, but we also think about financial sustainability. How are we going to fund services into the future as the taxation base changes? So.
Thank you. I've got a question here and then another one over here. So I've got two roving mics that are running around.
Hi, my name's Icon from International Enterprise Singapore. It was great to see the flash of open to collaboration and images of the Marina Bay Sands, so that's good to know. Just to clarify, and I think this is the understanding, that in terms of regional New South Wales, an actual location hasn't been identified, and is it therefore up to the proponent to put forward either a location or several locations as part of their tender?
Yeah, look, that's right. So we haven't identified a location yet. We didn't want to be too prescriptive because we're quite interested in a range of different use cases and trials, and we really wanted proponents to be able to work with potential local partners and find the right location and the right use case for a particular trial. All we've really done with locations is suggest that regional cities are a really good place to start, and we're right outside the metropolitan parts of Sydney, Newcastle and Wollongong. So we really want to make this a genuine regional trial, but it's up to the proponents to find those local partners and the best locations for the trial they want to undertake.
And Emma, you outlined some of the process there about the collaboration events and different things. Did you want to touch on anything from the ability for local councils, people that know the environment, to partner with or have the opportunity to speak with industry?
Yeah, absolutely. And to build on what Evan has just said, one of the key criteria is alignment to the location criteria. So you can choose any location that you like, and you've just got to demonstrate alignment to that criteria. And the local councils and the local communities in those areas are definitely going to be the ones who can give you the best insight into that local, particularly for people who are not from New South Wales. Local councils are going to be one of your best friends in developing the proposal and determining the correct location, and then making sure that feeds into your proposal to demonstrate how you align with that location criteria.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Brett Cooper from Renewable Hydrogen. Evan, are you able to give us a view as to how much money is available under the seed funding program?
Look, it's a difficult question for us to answer because we haven't seen the proposals that have come back through the door. So we've got a scale of funding that we can spend. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough to get enough, from our view, get one or more trials up and running from our experience. But we're really wanting to see what comes through the door and what kind of value for money there is. So look, I'm not going to give you a specific amount because we might get 3 really fantastic things through the door that we're going to try and fund, or we might get one. So we're really wanting to see what comes through the door, to be honest.
And as Evan outlined in his presentation before, because this is really about enabling that collaboration between different parties, there's so much scope in this through this process for different parties to come together with their in-kind and financial resources for us to spread that money over a number of trials.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, the way we operate at the Smart Innovation Centre is we're always happy to enable trials of automated vehicles. So if things come through the door that don't require funding, we're happy to work in that space, but this is an opportunity where we can put some seed funding in to partner in a trial, and hopefully more than one.
Excellent. Next question over here.
Thank you. My name's Gino and I'm from Kiama Council, and I just want to go off that question about location and the logistics, and just to get an understanding of the process. From what I understood there, you're going through the e-tender portal and you're getting information from all various players, stakeholders, depending on what role they play. Their proposal is going to be specific to their needs. So in terms of location, in my council, we've been working on this for the last 6 months, working with the community, and we do have a vision for how we could introduce this. How will the players in this room know that? And I understood that it would be done through putting an expression of interest. So would there be an expectation that from my council, I would put that submission in to say we would like to host this, or we would like to integrate it, and then rely on transport to communicate that to everybody? Or is it just going to be made available generally of the people in this room, I guess, as a starter, as who's interested in what role they would play? So
there's a couple opportunities. Emma touched on one before, and she'll go into that in a bit. I might just start broadly. Look, we're running, today's a good starting point. So what we want is from a lead proponent in March to submit a project that we can then consider, but that project is, it's got a good group of partners, or it's got the partnerships that are required so that it can be executed. So what we're doing is running a process. Today's the first part of it, but we'll do some regional collaboration events to facilitate people making those partnerships that create a holistic project. So if one proponent, if it's a council, if it's an industry player, comes through the door and this is our project, we would expect that by the end of this process, you'll have all the parts of it, all the partnerships you need to make it happen. But we'll try and facilitate that as much as we can.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, in terms of actually getting access to the information of who is out there and what they've got to offer, that is where that opt-in collaboration information will come into play. So we'll distribute those forms. People can submit them, providing their consent for them to be published and disclosed. And all of the information from this point forward about this process will be published through eTender and Ariba. That's why I said I encourage you all to register, so you are getting the updates. Every time we do an addendum or provide additional information, it'll be submitted and all of you will receive a notification that that's happened. So that is where you'll have your opportunity to put forward what you can bring, what you have to offer, and what you need from other people through that process.
And just to add to that, Emma's outlined the collaboration events, which really ties off that. At those collaboration events, there'll be an opportunity for anybody to get up and present to the audience as well. So that's where you would see potentially 3 or 4 or a number of location-based partners saying this is the location, this is the use cases that we're looking at. And then you might have the industry or technology-based partners saying this is the technology that we're looking to trial and these are the use cases that they're more suited to. And then there's a matching there that could happen within those environments.
And I do just want to further add, want to make it really clear that because we're holding the collaboration events in those locations, that's not where we're saying the trials need to be.
Yeah.
So we've just experienced that with the on-demand process. Where we've been to do the industry briefings is just to get a central point where we can get people to congregate and come, and we understand that does involve some travel for people, but we're absolutely not saying that that is where the trials need to be.
Steve Lynch from Compliance Consulting. Hi, Emma. Will the proposals need to meet the accessible transport standards?
I think that's a really interesting question, and I think what Julie mentioned earlier about mobility and around an ageing population in regional New South Wales is a critical thing for people to consider with their proposals. So we're not here to try and procure a service. So at some level, they might not meet all the standards, but we'd be aspiring that they do improve people's mobility. Some of the technology out there at the moment it's right on the cutting edge, so it's not quite there with meeting the accessibility standards from my experience, but there's proponents out there, they're getting really close. So if part of your proposal is around mobility and accessibility, the closer you get to those standards and the better it does along that path, you know, it's going to meet the criteria a lot better. So yeah. So I think it's really about the proposal that people are putting together and the use case they're trying to service.
Excellent. I've got another question in the middle here.
Thanks. Kathy from TransDev. Probably more a question for you, Julian. Your work that you've done is an extension of that last question. So I understand the regional industry briefings that are going to take place, the 4 of them. But in terms of the Transport Futures 2056 document, is everybody out there in terms of the councils and the business chambers, are they well versed in this process that has been launched in terms of the work that you've done?
Sure. So we had basically finished doing our roadshow when this EOI came out. So it came out on the last day, on the 1st of December, and we had basically finished at that point. But we certainly, as part of that, we went around and met with councils all across the state and industry, and certainly talked to the fact that these trials were happening in Sydney and that we were looking for these trials to happen in regional New South Wales, looking at starting next year. So they were certainly at all the briefings that I did, and I probably did about 50 maybe across the state. So I certainly talked to those at every one and highlighted that they were coming, but I didn't know the details of when at that point in time. So certainly, and since then I've had a lot of councils contacting me, following up and saying, if there's something happening, let me know, sort of thing. So, and since then obviously this has been announced, so.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, you got some comments around how we'll engage regional partners as part of that process as well?
Through the Future Transport one?
Oh no, through our regional collaboration events.
Yeah, so certainly. So that's a big part of it. Is there's the strategy work that's happened, the Future Transport, and that consultation there that Julie was leading. What this is really about is taking that to the next tangible level. How can we develop some trials and things that will come out of that? So people understand the strategy that Julie's done. Now we've got some of those regional collaboration events where we can really bring those people together, leverage those contacts that we've made by going out and having those sessions. Okay, we've got a question here. Glenn?
So, Glenn Geese, Australian Road Research Board. If I could beg your indulgence, I have 2 questions. So the first one is the evaluation criteria. You say in there that the weightings are likely to be different amongst the criteria. Can you elaborate on what those weightings might be?
The simple answer? No.
That's easy. And the second one is that in many cases the same automation technology can be used for various use cases. Will you need to put in separate proposals for every use case, or is it a demonstration of the technology plus the, you can see where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, the technology could be used for a number of use cases, undoubtedly, but we're looking for the best use case that gives us the best transport outcome, that's the best value for money. So we don't want to see a proposal that says, here I've got this great thing and it can do these 6 different things in these potential 6 locations. We want someone to come in and say, this is exactly where it's going to work, these are the partners, and this is the kind of outcome it's going to deliver. So yeah, so we're only looking for something, we're looking for the best proposals. Yeah.
So through those proposals, we're looking at what you want to do. So it might work on a number of different areas, but what are you saying you actually want to do? Yeah. So next question, who's got a mic? Got a question here? Guys, if you just put your hand up when you're ready to ask a question, we'll get the microphones around to different people.
Hello, Eduardo Nibot from University of Sydney. There were, when you provide the explanation, you mentioned that, we are going to be looking at cases like, for example, hospitals, universities, potentially, and you would like to explore the current and future technologies, but it's very hard to think about the scope of the project if the project will have a duration of 6 to 12 months. If you're thinking into 12 months, I mean that you are actually thinking about the deployment of existing technology and not future technology. Is there a scope in order to potentially consider some project that may look a little more into the future, that may extend potentially beyond the 12 to 24 months? I mean, it has been our experience that in order to transform, I mean, that ideas into potential commercial deployment, you need even demonstration, you may need something more than 1 year or 2 years. So that's, I would like to know your feeling about that. Huh?
Yeah, look, there's a range of criteria up there. Speed to market's one of them, but there's also criteria around innovation as well. So if an idea comes through the door that's fantastic and very future focused, we're open to consider it, absolutely. Other proposals might beat it in terms of speed to market, but it might be ahead on the innovation and value for money scale. So we'll look at that. In terms of the time frame, we are aiming to kick, so the 12-month period, we're aiming to kick off in the next financial year, so 2018, 2019, and potentially running for 24 months from the start of that. So there is some stretch if it's something really genuinely innovative and something that really meets our use cases, then we're going to have a look at it, of course.
The other thing that I'd add there, Eduardo, is there's going to be different stages in any projects that, you know, to get to the future that we've talked about, to set that vision. So I'd set it out to what's the first use case, what's that first sort of test that you're looking at over the 12-month time frame, and then how that could evolve into other things in the future. Okay, next question. Someone want to put their hand up? We've got one down here. Thanks, mate. And we've got a free mic over here, so we'll grab a question from this side of the room as well. Look like you're...
Sorry.
Sorry.
Pip from PwC. I was just wondering where the responsibility for the decision making within the CAB's technology is going to lie. Will it be with the project teams having to decide the decision frameworks, or will that be the role that New South Wales Government plays?
Sorry, can I just clarify that? Decision frameworks, what are you...
in terms of we're talking about autonomous vehicles who are able to make decisions as and when they come across situations. Who's actually driving that decision making?
Yeah, Evan.
Yeah, okay, so it's an interesting question. Basically, the way we've framed the legislative framework and how ministerial orders might be created will deem who's responsible for that aspect of the project. So it depends, again, what we get through the door, how people construct it, how the technology works, who's the technology owner. Is it the proposal is a partnership with an OEM or someone else? But that's something we'll definitely set out. It's not going to be, if you're talking about an automated driving system, making driving decisions and who's responsible for that, that won't be Transport for New South Wales. That'll be somewhere in the project environment, whether it is the key proponent, whether it's the actual technology developer. That's something we can put into the ministerial order and the conditions of the trial. Does that kind of answer your question?
Pretty much, and then I guess the second phase might be more how do you share learnings across projects if there's more than 1 or 2 trials?
Yeah, and I guess,
different systems.
So in terms of shared learnings, that's why Transport wants to partner. So from our perspective, if we partner in a number of trials, you know, we can generate learnings out of both. Our role is to obviously share the learnings we get as government. We're not going to hold them internally. Our whole mission is to have shared learnings. But of course, people are going to bring IP into projects and we'll have to shape IP agreements. So you're not going to share things that people believe is their intellectual property as well.
And just to touch on that as well, that's one of the real opportunities for trials like this, is to have different groups that are interested in sort of more niche elements. So around some of that decision science or something, if there's an academic researcher out there that's looking at that, it's the opportunity to use these sort of trials as a platform to do that. So to get involved early and co-develop what are the use cases and what are the things that you're going to be looking at there. Excellent. Any other questions? One at the back here.
Yeah, g'day Evan. Jim Kira from Nova Systems. As you know, the national guidelines have been published for the conduct of the trials, but the COAG ministers have just announced that they were going to be adopting a safety assurance system that eventually will use a self-certification regime that's not likely to be implemented until 2019, 2020, as we know. So my question to you is, how does TfNSW envisage managing the safety, first of all, establishing the criteria for the safety case that you'll expect to see for each of these trials, and also the evidence that needs to be gathered during the trials to be able to demonstrate compliance against that safety case? Will you be having interim criteria that you'll expect to see to be able to then make a determination as to the success of the trials?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So one of the key learnings we expect from any automated vehicle trial is to understand the safety case and the criteria we need to do the safety assurance process. So the national framework might not happen, or the safety assurance process till 2019, 2020, but as you're aware, that's an iterative process. It's still in design, it's still being built. So one of the key points of the trials that we're doing here, Victoria, South Australia, is to provide learnings back into that process. So in 2019 or 2020, whenever that's shaped up, it's had the benefit of all the trials that we've all undertaken, because that's not a clear point just yet. People are still working on it. So what we use is basically the information we can get from manufacturers and the certification they've already done. We've got our own safety assurance things that we already run around rail, around systems that we can consider. And we've got our road safety processes around road safety audits, vehicle safety standards. So we've got a reasonable amount of already obtained knowledge. So we build something that's bespoke for the trial at the moment, and that'll help us pass on learnings as they go. So like I said, we're about to publish our first order for the trial at Sydney Olympic Park. That will be out soon for everyone to have a look at. And that's our first step down that path. And then whoever becomes a proponent in this trial will get to experience the next iteration of that. Yep.
Okay, the next question. We've got one over this side here. Thank you. Can you pass that to? Sorry, we'll get a microphone.
Thanks. Scott Benjamin from WSP. Just a question. We've seen a lot of focus on accessibility and mobility from a personal perspective. Is there an interest in freight? There was a comment about other transport needs. Is freight a focus in this EOI?
Look, freight's not the main focus of this, but we wouldn't not consider something that came through which had potential freight outcomes or productivity outcomes. So we've tried to shape this with in mind what's out there, what's ready to deploy, and our feeling is that's more in the passenger mobility space. But having said that, if there's a freight proposal that comes in and can fit within the criteria and provide some really good insights for transport, we would consider it. And that's what Claire mentioned earlier.
Just to sort of add to that point, if somebody was considering a freight proposal, they would need to consider that it's going to be evaluated against the objectives which were outlined, and so that refers a lot to customer mobility use cases. Okay, do we have another question? One from this side of the room? Got one here.
Stand up this time. Kathy from TransNSW again. Just a quick one. I'm assuming that there's no issues in terms of a provider putting more than one application to the panel or as part of the process, and that based on merits, it could be two or more could be funded?
Sure. Look, I don't think there's any problem with that from my perspective. If there's two great projects and they're the best value for money and meet the best outcomes, that's where we'll go. The only advice I'd have, and Emma might be able to unpack this a bit more, is that each of those is completely filled out projects. We wouldn't want two things that aren't quite filled out. We'd want things that are really thought through, end-to-end type things.
Yep. Correct.
Just to add sort of one really clarifying there. So we've got in the procurement documentation that people would have downloaded, there's a line in there that says proposal partners may provide financial in kind or any other desired form of support to one or more proposals. However, proposal partners should have the relevant capacity to deliver all the supported trials should they be enabled. So if somebody was to say that they're going to be involved in 10 trials and all 10 go, or whatever number of trials it is, they should be prepared to actually do that. Okay, we'll go a question over this side. Thanks.
Thank you. Tony from Singleton Council. Just wondering what happens with the tenderers that miss out. So they don't go forward, but there might be a good use case or a good need in the wider community. How do we get hold of those and look at the proposals to possibly move them forward with different partners other than the state government?
Yeah, look, I don't know. That's a really good question because this process right now is about us being able to provide seed funding into projects. Like I said earlier, we're happy to enable things where we don't provide seed funding. We're running a process here because that's what's happening right now, but we're definitely interested in supporting other pieces of work. So how a non-successful project might be circulated and re-put into the system, that's something I guess we can consider as we go,
Yeah, if I just touch on confidentiality a little bit, obviously we would never release any of the proposals that we got through this process, but part of the requirements of this process are that a list of people who did put in submissions is published. So then obviously there's going to be announcements about what is successful, powers of deduction, you're going to work out who wasn't successful. There's also then going to be the information we put out through the opt-in collaboration events, which will give you information and contacts, but under no circumstances would we release any of the proposals that were received under the process.
Just to draw on something again, to make that very clear, in the EOI documentation, we've said in cases where Transport for New South Wales is not in a position to fund the project, we will support the enablement of a trial and where possible assist proponents to seek alternative funding. So if there's some other grants or things that are out there, that's something that potentially that project team could look to seek.
Yeah, for an example, I don't know what technology is out there. That's not the area of my expertise. So there may be a brilliant idea that may need $3 million to get it up above the line, but I just don't know it exists. So I can't look for funding. I can't see how it benefits my community. So it'd be nice once this process is finished to roughly know the order of magnitude we're looking in, what the benefits are, so then we can approach those people and possibly pursue them on our own outside your help, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, under the requirements of the RFEOI and confidentiality, they're just not details that we would release. So the only way to do it is to work out who did put in a submission and contact them if they're not successful. And absolutely, once the process is concluded, people who weren't successful can go and sell themselves as well and sell their proposals and what they did put in through the process once the process is concluded.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing I'd add is through the networking after this, through the collaboration events in regional areas, we're hoping that everyone gets a really good feel for who's doing what and what's out there, and most of those bases do get covered off. Yeah.
Excellent. Next question. Got one over this side. And so we've got two mics going around, guys. Just put your hand up when you might have a question and we can get the mics across to you.
Elias Harb, WSP. Just wondering whether this is limited to land vehicles or if air or sea vehicles are also a possibility.
Do you want to take that one, Evan? If not, I'll...
Yeah, it's a really good question, that one.
That's all right, I might jump on you then. So the way that
did we put land in the scope? I can't remember.
It's not explicit to any form. Just where technology is at the moment, a lot of the focus is on land. Yeah. Keep in mind that it's passenger mobility and automated systems. So this is an innovative process. We're looking for innovative ideas to come through to us. I'd encourage you to sort of seek out any that you can find there. We'd be interested to have a chat. Whether it comes through this process or something else is another question though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything more to add on that one. I just, I've just got a lot of thoughts in my mind.
Me
you know,
too.
so-
Okay, any other questions from the audience here? One on this side, maybe? No? Okay, I might pose one to the panel then. Evan, you mentioned integrating in with sort of assets and systems and things that transport have. Could you expand a little bit on what you mean by that, and what are some of the opportunities? What could proponents be thinking about for opportunities areas there?
Yeah, look, obviously, from a service point of view, obviously Transport already runs services in a lot of regional towns, whether it's rail, where there's air services coming in, whether it's bus services. So obviously things that integrate with our current transport provision is really interesting. And then to expand onto, you know, the actual physical systems, traffic signals, all those kind of things, that's really of interest to us as well. So things that integrate with a set of traffic signals, really interesting as well. You know, but obviously we've also got bus stops, we've got the full range of transport assets out there. So we want to understand how that fits in with what we're providing, or what else we could provide to enable the kind of service that's being offered. And there's also, I guess, digital platforms as well that we have around, you know, you've got things like PTIPs, which we use to do, you know, vehicle priority, and we understand where our bus fleet is at the moment. So even from the digital space, how does it integrate with the different digital systems we have as well? Because we're really interested in making an integrated transport system.
I'd also add to that certainly a lot of regional cities have very wide grid-like street patterns. Certainly a lot of main streets in regional New South Wales are twice the width of George Street. So there is certainly a lot of space within them, perhaps for connected and automated vehicle trials that are going to be separate enough from pedestrians and other conflict road users. So you know, thinking in terms of a precinct is obviously a very safe environment, but certainly a lot of the regional cities have that great width and certainly the grid-like pattern that perhaps we don't have in places like Sydney.
Okay, any other questions around from the room? And I'll just stress again that, so we've got one question here. This is really a great opportunity to ask any of those clarifying questions, whether it's about the assessment process going through or how we turn it into an actual approval to get a trial on the ground.
Graham McCabe from JHD. My question is about the going from 12 months to 24 months. Is it more on the technology or the service delivery side which would be the enabler for the extension of the trial?
Look, from my perspective, I think it'd be probably from the service delivery side. That'd be my view. Like, the technology is really important, but we're really interested in the use case. So it'd be something that's demonstrating a really good use case. The other side could be what Eduardo was talking about before. There's a step that needs to happen with the technology, and we're really interested in it taking that next step. And we've watched the first stage of the project, and it is going to take that extra time to realise. So you could look at it from both angles, I think. Yeah.
Excellent. Next question. See a hand over here. No? Any more questions from the audience?
One very quick one.
Sorry, we'll just wait for a microphone. Eduardo. Thank you.
Yes, very quick one. How do you define regional in New South Wales? Is outside Sydney or?
Yep, so in the EOI document there are some maps attached at the back, and so it is considered all of rural and regional New South Wales, which is what we're seeing for this project, is outside of the Sydney and out of Sydney Metro bus contract regions. So the maps there define those regions, it's anything outside of that.
And we've used the bus regions not because we're just talking about buses, but because they do really contain the metro versus regional areas. Yep.
Okay, are there any other questions from the audience here? No, I might just throw it over. Was there anything from the panel that you guys wanted to clarify or use the opportunity at the moment for?
Probably the only thing that I wanted to cover off is just how positive the interactive sessions, the feedback we got from those sessions were. So I do encourage everyone here to take part in that process, no matter how formed or not your proposal may be at that stage. You know, it's a really good opportunity to come in, and you've got skills and experience from across the organisation at those meetings where you can ask questions, we can ask you questions, and it really gives you an opportunity to get real-time feedback and enable enhancements of your proposal. So don't be scared, register for one and have one. And even if you're not sure, still register for one, and then you can always pull out. But I just encourage everyone here, the feedback from the industry through the process we did was overwhelmingly positive about the benefit that you get out of that.
Okay, we've got another question here. And if anybody else wants to ask a question, put your hand up. Otherwise, we'll be wrapping up shortly.
Greg Pullen, Shoalhaven City Council. Those interaction sessions, are they going to be regionally based or centrally based? Because if we've got a partnership that involves 6 or 7 people, and probably from there it's not too bad, but if you're in Lismore, it's a bit of a problem.
So I'm going to take a punt at answering that, and Andrew may kick me from over there. But I assume it's going to be a similar approach to how we're doing the on-demand project, so people will be required to register. Once that registration closes, we'll look at where those registrations are coming from, and then we'll try and assign locations, dates and times that make sense. I mean, obviously, logistics, we can't get to everyone, but we will try to get to centralised locations that make sense, where we can get people congregated into one spot that makes sense without people having to travel too much.
Excellent. Any other questions from the floor before we close? Okay, great. So just to sort of finish up, in a moment we're going to open up this space and outside for some networking. So to your questions earlier, it's really an opportunity to sort of get to meet some of the people that are around here. What are people interested in? How could you potentially collaborate through this process? Just to touch on something briefly, we mentioned that all of the communications will go to the people that have registered through the e-tender or Ariba portals. That's why it's so important that we can capture your details through that. We've launched a couple of event registration links for the collaboration sessions. We will be booking in the times, dates and exact locations for those shortly. So those will be up there. So they're the links that you can use to register for those events. And just to close off, thank you. It's been a great day today, and hopefully it really helped you to sort of frame the ideas for how we can collaborate through this process and develop some good proposals. So cheers.